I think every collector has at least one figure in their collection that they only have because there really isn't a better option out there. You know, if you want, this particular character at the retail level, it's either that or you spend like $300 on some super high-end thing out of Japan. Well, you can't always do that. Sometimes you just have to stick with the best thing retail had to offer. And if you're a fan of Ratchet, this is it. Coming out in Universe 2 in 2008, it's a remold of Ironhide that I reviewed a long time ago on this channel. And it's still the same problematic mold it was then. There's just a few changes here and there. So let's get into it. Of course, he is an SUV, trying to take him out of that 80s van shape that I don't think a kid would really buy. In the age, the kind of the age when it was even hard getting them to buy an SUV toy for that matter. He's cast in a nice white plastic. It's a little shade off, so it's a slight cream color. It's not completely bright white, except for a few parts that have been painted over in super bright white, making him stand out a little bit. And done up with a lot of red trim, pretty much all over. You got a brush guard there on the front done up in red. You see the stripes around the front as well as a big swash of red across the top. And then, of course, on the sides where you have that pulse pattern, because we can't do a red cross anymore. Trade marking. Red bumper, too, which is just an accident of the mold casting, which is kind of weird because that does not really look like something that would be on a real vehicle. The best part about the deco is, of course, the license plate, which is Help Us, complete in the proper color to reference an old Marvel Transformers cover. One of the most distinct moments of Ratchet's fictional life. Not the proudest, but hey, it's there. The only real change to the mold in this mode is going to be that light bar on top, which is taken from Universe 2 Prowl. That does work on a pursuit vehicle, that sleek, angular light bar. On an ambulance, not so much. I'm looking for something a little bit more traditional on this. This is a stretch to call it an ambulance in the first place, since it is just an SUV. It looks like something you'd be picking up your kids from soccer in. This is a stretch, and it's more or less better to consider like a first responder style vehicle. Even that's kind of a push, but it's trying. It's trying its best. Other little points of note: translucent blue for the windows, at least the front windows, as well as the tail lights and headlights. Silver for the grille in the front, and then super bright baby blue for the side windows, which do not in any way match the translucent windows. I always love when you do that, Hasbro. Speaking of the windows, you notice they look broken? You notice how they look cracked? You notice how there's one completely missing here? See, my issue with this mold has always been it came right after the first movie line, and you could tell the designers were still in that kind of engineering mode. This thing is so complicated to an unnecessary degree. You think of G1 Ratchet and you think of one of the boxiest Autobots there was. Like, how do you take a boxy robot and make a boxy vehicle out of it? It seems like it would be easy. Energon did it more than once. But for some reason, they were still in this really involved engineering scheme that the movies necessitated. So you have so many panel lines all over, so many cuts in the vehicle where you can see this thing is supposed to be transforming. And you've got gap after gap after gap after gap, allowing for all of these little parts to actually make all the complex and, frankly, unnecessary motions they make. This doesn't seem like it would have been a hard vehicle to do into like a boxy Ratchet. Somehow they made it happen, and I don't know how. Before the review, this took me like 20 minutes just to get back into vehicle mode because I couldn't get a lot of the gaps to close up because there's so many things that go wrong. It's an engineering thing. Have you ever heard of the KISS rule? It's keep it simple, stupid, or less insultingly, keep it simply stupid, which means the less going on, the less likely something will go wrong. Quite a few things went wrong on this toy. We'll go into the transformation to get to that, but first I need to pop out the weapon, so he does have weapon storage at least. See, it takes just a little bit of shimmying, and you can see things just start coming undone. You can see really doesn't hold together all that well. struggle just to get to hold together this long. So we're going to start by popping the front up and getting all of this out of the way. And from here, the legs are going to unplug, like so. They're also going to come undone because a lot of the parts on this particular figure is just held on with friction pegs. They're barely even like flared or anything to keep them where they're supposed to go, which is kind of strange. Move these out to the side. These will become the arms at some point, but for now we have to move back to the legs, where in order to transform we have to open up the front and the hood of the vehicle. We have to open it up to allow the thigh to swing all the way out, and then we have to fold the front in, then we fold this hood back down in place. All this section that was the bottom, this has to fold up, this has to fold up. That becomes one of your legs. Why is that so involved? Done. Alright, so we'll do that again on this side. Get all of this out of the way first. Get this moved up. Swing the thigh out. Fold all of that back up together. Fold all of that up back together without making me look like an idiot. There we go. And now we have a set of legs. Let's go back up to the upper section of this toy where swing all of this down. That closes all that up. Swing the wheels back like so to get them out of the way. All of this folds up and that will become a backpack. At this point, we need to start folding all these things together. Sometimes that's about as far as it'll go. In one bit of automorphing, folding the bumper up does bring up this little panel that creates a robotic chest. I will admit that part is not bad. I do kind of like that part. Click all that in together. Now we get the arms rotated around and all of these hinges that unfurl to create the actual arm. Do the same thing on this side. And that's going to give us our completed Universe Ratchet in his robot mode, which I might double check just to make sure everything is locked together as appropriately as it's supposed to be. Okay, yeah, we're all good here. So this is what we get as our robot mode Ratchet. Looking a little interesting. He definitely has some movie aesthetic just to how his parts have assembled together. We've got a lot to go over on this toy, so we are going to start with the head. And don't adjust your screens if you can, even. Yeah, that's a little bit downtrodden. Now, this was a problem they had on Ironhide as well, where this panel that the head rests on feels like it should come back a little bit farther, like it's not quite clearing the gap the way it's supposed to. And instead, his head just kind of looks like it's pointed downward. And even if you angle his torso to actually get in the way, like the torso itself gets in the way of his face, which means he's just permanently sullen, just a little bit sad, eyes downcast. He really doesn't want you to talk to him or look at him. He's a little bit introverted these days. So let's see what we have going on with the rest of the toy. Yeah, we've got a little bit of a mess. So the toy itself is okay in proportions. The torso section's pretty hefty compared to how thin the arms ended up, but that's not terribly different from Ratchet's, especially if you're looking at the G1 toy. Why would you? Now, the big issue here for me is he's got this huge backpack chunk where about a third of his vehicle mode has to fold up, as well as the fact that his legs end up looking pretty broken and hollow. There's these huge gaps between where his shins stop and his foot begins, and while, hey, that's plenty of clearance for his foot articulation, it doesn't really look good as a robot, does it? There's plenty of give in all these little joints and everything, but nothing that can really close that up, so that's really an unfortunate little thing. Unfortunate's the term for the toy, I think. You can see just like how thin the arm parts gets around here, and this is where the complexity starts really kind of unfolding a lot. You got panels stuck onto the arms. You've got all these different extra hinges in here just for the transformation they did come up with. There's just a lot of things around here that's a lot sloppier than engineering we were used to, thanks to the Classics line, which was so smooth and intuitive in design. whereas this seemed to go out of its way to create complexity. Overall, not a bad job, at least as far as detailing goes. It's just, there's just a lot of things coming from the fact that, it's just strangely created. I mean, look, you got 3 screws visible in each shoulder. Like, clearly not the best design thoughts went into this toy. But overall, at least the molding is nice. You got a lot of little details hidden, a little bit on the back of the legs and such, so that's not too bad. And we have kind of spiced up the color scheme with a little bit of black, just kind of hitting here and there to break up all the red and white. Not necessarily a bad thing there. But, most of the deco's carried over from the vehicle mode. What's left over of the stripes that didn't really match up or go into straight lines in the vehicle mode in the first place. But hey, it is what it is. I do like the chest. Like I said, at least some of the molding is nice. You got the Autobot symbol shining through, and a bunch of mechanical details inside, which does make a lot of sense for this guy. As far as the articulation goes, well, his head does move left and right. It's a little bit hindered by the socket it's stuck in, because it doesn't go up all the way, but hey, what are you going to do? You do have some rare torso give here in this direction, so at least on that note, he does have some ability to put his arms out in front of him. That's kind of rare on a Transformer. You have rotation here at the shoulder as well as that, giving him a universal range. You have a bicep, or a forearm swivel just below the elbow. The elbow itself, kind of limited, doesn't hit 90 degrees, so that's a bummer. Wrist is ball jointed, and the hand itself does hinge thanks to transformation, so that's good at least. His waist is weird, because the waist joint itself is like way up here in the torso, and there's a slight angle to it if you're not positioning the legs to compensate. So it's a little bit strange and kind of puts his torso off. Slight adjustments you don't really notice, but when we just go a little bit too far out, it gets bizarre. Universal hips works out for me. Thigh swivel works all the way around. Knees, again restricted. We don't get to the 90 degree there either. At least he does have an ankle rock, so at some point he's a good toy. Plenty of motion there. So he does have articulation, though it all kind of comes up limited in some regards. And as you saw during transformation, there are just components of him that are just simply pegged into place. That also goes for his legs, which can be really loose in the thigh swivel, just because they are pegged, straight up pegged into those spots without really any major friction or pin or anything holding him in. At least in the accessory department, he does have something going on that's a little bit interesting. So, since he is the surgeon, we're going to go ahead and give him his scalpel. We can do that by clipping this into place right over his hand in order to give him an arm-mounted weapon. Ironhide was fond of his arm-mounted weapons, all the gimmicks he could replace his hand with. So Ratchet, being the same mold, gets to do the same. So we do have a scalpel on one side, and just in case the doctor does need to defend his patient, we can flip it over onto the reverse and clip that in and find a chain gun barrel on the other side, which is kind of neat. You even have like a targeting scope up top, which is completely blocked by the molding, but hey, ignore that, it's a targeting scope. So he does have that, and at least it's an interesting little bit of weaponry for him. So there are unique points to the toy and the mold itself, but overall, that, my friends, is Universe Ratchet. This is a problematic little figure. Like, he has some good articulation, but a pretty strange look to his robot mode that really does not harken back to the G1 toy the way the classics figures did, so he kind of doesn't fit into there. Combine that with a vehicle mode full of gaps, full of panel lines, and with a paint job that, because of gaps in panel lines, doesn't really match up all the way through, and you've got what is essentially a really sloppy figure by a designer who was really, really overcomplicating how this toy worked in his mind. It's just what happens when a designer goes from the movies to the classic aesthetic. Sometimes it does not always work, and in the case of Universe, it took a little bit in order to start getting figures that could stand side by side with the classics toys and kind of look like one solid toy line. But this was not the Ratchet we had been waiting on, and short of going for the masterpiece, I'm still waiting on a Ratchet that can fit in with my classics display.